My name is Jill Phillips and I'm the creator of Whose Shoes, a popular approach to co-production. I was named as an HSJ 100 wildcard and want to help give a voice to others, talking about their experiences and ideas. I love chatting with people from all sorts of different perspectives, walking in their shoes. If you are interested in the future of healthcare and like to hear what other people think, or perhaps even contribute at some point, Wildcard Whose Shoes is for you. So hello and welcome to another episode of the Wildcard Whose Shoes podcast. Yay! This episode has taken a long time coming, but I'm so excited to be talking to my good friend Mary Salama, a wonderful consultant paediatrician in Birmingham. Mary is one of my absolute faves in terms of a really lovely, warm person who makes extraordinary things happen rather than just talking about what needs to change. And to do that for children and young people has to be the very best thing. Mary will be talking about the work that she does with children with clinically complex needs, including, and I love this, enabling them to go home rather than staying in hospital if non-medical factors such as availability of equipment are holding them back. She will be talking about the fabulous work she's doing through Powering Up and the Canal Project, and I'll be chipping in because I was beyond thrilled to be invited along to join her a couple of weeks ago at the wonderful co-production event she held in Birmingham, listening to young people share their views about the future of healthcare. We will be talking about our co-founded hashtag, Intentional Coffee, our own special way of bringing people together and having great conversations, which all started when we first met in a coffee queue. Co-production, learning from excellence, pink hats, deep listening, building relationships and having fun. So grab a coffee, find a quiet space and meet my friend Mary.
So Jill, I'm so thrilled to be here talking about all of these things and so much more with you. As you know, I'm a paediatrician, but I think when I dig deep, my main drive is around improvement and my drive for that is around being annoyed. So a lot of the things that we will talk about have been driven through a sense of frustration and a tipping point around making things better for both the patient in front of me or the person in front of me, but also the wider people in the system.
Brilliant.
I've got a real interest in human factors, which is how humans interact with their systems. And I think when you look at the problems that we're facing in the NHS and particularly around children in the NHS, then actually you need to draw on different ways of thinking to try and make things better.
Yeah, it's so important. And already, I mean, you knew this would happen. So I love connecting people through the podcast. And I've got this just feeling that it's all about people and it doesn't matter really whether you're talking about a particular topic or a particular group of people. So coincidentally, my last podcast that I've just recorded is with Angela Catley and completely different topic, When I Get Old. But she's got this lovely concept that she picked up, I think, from a conference recently, and I think you'll love it, Mary. Furiosity. So that's when curious comes together with furious, and that's exactly how you started there. That's amazing. So you've got a bit of furiosity.
Do you know, I love that word, and I think I'll nick that. Thanks, Angela. I think it is. I think frustration can be quite a negative kind of connotated word, but actually, I think the drive to change and the curiosity about why things are so frustrating is brilliant. So yes, furiosity.
I knew you'd like that one.
So I think riffing on furiosity, I think you end up seeing things from a different perspective, which is very much the Whose Shoes ethos, and it's around bringing people together that might see a problem from a different perspective and creating solutions or lemon light bulbs through those connections. And I think when I started my journey, it very much started as a child of parents who were sick and seeing health system from maybe a slightly different lens. my dad was an obstetrician, and so I spent a lot of time living in hospital accommodation, but also interacting with staff members as part of my childhood. So bleeping my dad through the theatre coordinator to, ask him if I could go out, and going in to do ward rounds with him on Christmas Day, and, kind of doing terrible carol singing, actually. So moments like that really connect you with the idea of the NHS and the ideal of the NHS. And I think that's why I wanted to do medicine, because it was very much working together to make people better and well. And I really love that idea. I think as I journeyed through, what you then see is that you can't do that as well as you might want to. And there are lots of different reasons for that. And I think that's what drives a lot of the work that I do. So I think in my early years as a consultant, one of the things that I became really interested in is how we improved care for children who had lots of different teams involved and were kind of a bit stuck in the system. So I'd done a lot of cardiology as a trainee, and although the patients on the cardiology ward and their families got excellent cardiology management, the holistic care was sometimes patchy, and I wanted to make that better. So that started off a journey with others to look at solutions for children with medical complexity. And it's really interesting, and you see this a lot, that people at Furios, how do you say that?
I guess they have to be curious and furious.
Yeah, curious, yeah. So basically people are curious and furious about the same things at the same time. So what you'll find is that there will be a change, because there's things that change across the country in similar ways, and people have that same reaction. And I think part of what I'd like to talk to you about is how we channel that and connect them together, because we're better together and we're better collaborating, especially when it comes to really tricky problems. So what I've found with the journey with the children with complexity is that people were furious and curious about it at the same time from many different disciplines, from a nursing perspective, from a management perspective. And we ended up coming together and looking at the solution of creating a team that would then look at this problem. And that's grown over the last 10 years and done some work that has been presented at national scale, and actually segued into, again, other people's journeys around the furious and curious, to create a collab, which is the collab partnership, which is a space really for people, key stakeholders, including parents front and foremost, to come together to try and look at improving care for children with complexity. And I think that was really fortuitous, because that was where Intentional Coffee was made, really, with our talk that we had to create together for the online virtual COVID-style conference that we were running. And I think that journey of sessions talking to you about the content that we were thinking about presenting really sparked off that idea around intentionality of connection, and that idea that actually that kind of deliberation and that deliberate creation of space to be able to connect with somebody who you feel would help you open more ripples in terms of the work stream that you're going down.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Miriam. I think I was hoping that you'd pick up on your incredibly interesting background as a child, which, inevitably in this podcast, you can only sort of touch upon compared with some of the learning that I've had in terms of your experience as a child and how that shaped you. I find that fascinating. And what you were saying there was naturally morphed through, I think, our shared interest, the curiosity in people's stories, that everybody's got a story, and to see how people have ended up where they are and those very formative experiences they've had, and the whole holistic approach that I think is very much what's brought us together.
Yeah.
Better together. And collab, I think when I first heard the story of collab, and as I understand it, it is Curiosity for Children, isn't it? Is that that the group of people that's come together, and that special group? And I was just so thrilled to be invited to open, I think, the the collab conference.
We did, yeah.
With something that was, yeah. I was asked to be perhaps a bit of a motivational speaker. What the story was, so for people listening, so that we don't just go off on one, Mary, because we can do that. Big time.
Yeah.
That when I saw the draft programme and I got the first 20 minutes and I saw, oh my goodness, my friend Mary Salama's got the next 20 minutes, and we got together and said, well, how about if we kind of blend it as rather than just a talk and then you talking more about the practice, that we just get together and we've got Mary, we've got 40 minutes. We can do something with 40 minutes. And then bringing in Joe Minford at the end, which was my dream, really.
Yeah.
So in terms of intentional coffee, that was quite a story, really.
No, it was lovely. And I think you touch on a couple of points that really are the golden thread. So the intentional coffee obviously is important, but it's also that perspectives and blending, and actually you're not having parallel perspectives. So not bringing things in a, sort of listed agenda, but trying to really dig deeper to then combine them. And I think unless you go deeper, you won't be able to combine authentically. And I think that's the kind of thing that you see in your co-production events, in the way the gamification of that co-production is really important, because what it does is create connections outside the topic in ways that then enable you to feel safe enough to open up and really share.
That's interesting. And I think, I'm sure you feel the same, that you've got a kind of just gut feeling that something works, and then you try it out a little bit, quite timid, and then, whoa, that really did work. And then you can, the next time, be a little bit bolder with it and a little bit more confident, perhaps. So, I've found in terms of connecting, certainly with the Who She's workshops now, and we try and get people, if they want to make a pledge about what they individually can do to make a difference. And I've pretty much discovered that whatever anybody says, I can add some value through networking. So somebody who's perhaps already doing that, or somebody that I think they just connect with. And what was it, the event that you were at, Mary, where we had the amazing conversation about British Sign Language?
Yeah, yep, it was, and it was beautiful. Yeah,
it really was beautiful. Somebody on one table basically doing all they could to support people who were deaf or with a hearing impairment in a healthcare setting, and genuinely from the heart, that was their passion, and feeling a little bit lost and alone. And I just asked the direct question, do you think there's anyone that could help you with this? And they said no. And then on the very next table, one of the participants of the event started actually signing live and was desperate to be the next person to speak. And those two people connected. And then suddenly you've got a buddy who's passionate about the same thing as you. Now, I've got no idea where that will go, but when I saw those two people connect and actually have a hug on the day, I thought there's a little spark happening there that's pretty special. And you can't plan for these things.
And you can't. And the thing is that actually, even if the spark goes absolutely nowhere in terms of outputs and data, actually that spark in and of itself is an outcome. And I was quite struck about, so I was listening to your initial podcast around the idea of wellness and health and, that whole looking after your staff. And actually a lot of wellness we know from many studies and interventions really centres around connection. When you look at blue zone communities or you look at teams that work well, actually they're connected, and connection is vital to that feeling of happiness and belonging, and leads to much more than just that momentary feeling.
Yes.
So I think creating the connection is really important, just for the generation of energy that happens in that moment.
Yeah, and perhaps even for other people to witness that.
Yes.
You don't know what spin-offs there might be around the room, that it's not to do with that particular conversation or those two people connecting, but other people, I think, sometimes see possibilities.
Yeah.
And people get quite stuck, I think, with how difficult things are at the moment in life and in the healthcare system, and you can feel a bit hopeless. And I think anything that gives people hope, anything that gives them something to think, well, that happened, I can perhaps do something, is quite powerful.
I agree. I think the warmth spreads, and actually a bit like the light bulbs, that actually you have little light bulbs going, and that creates a sense of sort of warm and safe and positive and all of the things that we associate with light. And I think another place where I have experienced that and do every year is the Learning from Excellence conference. So I use that as my wellness time, I have to say. So I book that every year and go for some life reaffirming positivity. And I think that's a kind of thing that can create this kind of movement forward in a more positive way.
Yeah, brilliant.
Have you ever been, Jill?
No, I haven't. I've only been to, so it's Adrian Plunkett, isn't it?
Yes.
Is one of your champions, and I've
He's
joined
lovely.
one or two of his online sessions, and just the whole concept of learning from excellence I find just so obviously positive rather than blaming everybody, and it's a refreshing. I can see, I love the idea that you go along to just reaffirm and meet positive people. And I think that was my experience as well when we first met at the Q Community event, that I hadn't been to a Q Community event before, and like everywhere I turned there seemed to be people who've got interesting stories, people who are wanting to make change. And I think it sounds as if it's a similar experience in that it just makes you go away feeling fired up rather than flattened.
Yes, I think that is true, Joe. And I think both Adrian and Emma, his wife, who work on the Learning from Excellence, are really just quietly positive. So
yes,
I'm not quite so quiet. And I think it's really authentic, that calm, quiet positivity. And
yes.
And also a well thought out positivity. It's not a brash, reactionary, everything is awesome kind of Legoland kind of positivity.
Yeah, or superficial.
Superficial. It's very deep. So one of the things that I've learned from watching Adrian and Emma and their wider amazing LFE team work is that it's really authentic. And I really want to emulate that in the kind of work that I do, that it needs to be authentic co-production, and that you need to really be able to hear difficult things and feel safe discussing them. And I think that needs work on building relationships and building the roots and deepening the roots together as a team to then authentically co-produce together.
Yeah, and that really resonates with me, because it's funny how things sometimes come full circle. So in terms of why I jumped ship from my day job to set up Who's Shoes and try and actually listen to people and not just tick boxes. In my case, what was personalised care, I felt that nobody really knew, and we needed to discover that by talking to people. And then fast forward 16 years as it is now, and at worst I can feel that somebody feels they perhaps ought to have one of those Who's Shoes things because they've been told to do co-production, and they really don't understand the deep preparation, relationship building, making people feel valued from the very beginning. Co-production starts that way before the actual event, and that's what makes the success, rather than just a tick box, which could be called a Who's Shoes event, and you have one of those things and you hope it all turns out as well as the event that you perhaps saw on a film or something. And I think that relationship building, people can tell whether it's genuine. People know whether you're really listening to them for themselves or for your own agenda.
I do agree, and actually I think there's a risk to doing it when you haven't done that groundwork, and the risk is
it can be dangerous.
It can be dangerous, yeah, and dangerous for clinicians and dangerous for families and patients with lived experience. I think you have to be very careful about how you go about that, and I know you do a lot of work thinking about it and planning it and identifying the people and managing things on the day. And I think it would be lovely to have that as a kind of toolkit, or I don't want to say toolkit because that makes it all very regimented, but almost like a Mary Poppins bag or something, that you open that you have a bag of things that you kind of pull out if you need them. If you need a light bulb, there are people generationally that won't know what I'm talking about at all, but if you don't, please go and watch Mary Poppins until it's been remade, hasn't it? So maybe actually they do.
So that really links up. I'm working with Lise Edwards in particular at Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust, and she always uses as her example like the Harry Potter version of Whose Shoes.
Oh, nice.
So we're doing some bespoke work together, and in terms of the different scenarios and poems and so on, then we need to develop another little subset of cards, and she describes it to people like the Harry Potter version of Trivial Pursuits, I think is her phrase. So you've now brought Mary Poppins in, so we've got it's much more fun than a toolkit.
Well, yeah, and I think it speaks to your whole ethos, which is around being creative around how we have those conversations. And that's what happened recently with another person I really want to mention, and hopefully you'll get a chance to chat to her in more detail. But Goody Singh has been incredible at galvanizing change. And so she's a paediatrician interested in public health who has created and led the wellbeing and health action movement within the paediatric arena, which is around reducing inequalities for young people. And I think it speaks to what you talked about, the tribal Q community positivity, because she put in a Q exchange bid for Powering Up, which is co-producing solutions to health inequality with young people. And so I'd put in a separate bid for the Canal Project, which is kind of similar, but centred around Birmingham. So improving health for children of Birmingham by creating connections in the same ways that the canals connect people together within the city. And so drawing on that parallel, I'd put in a bid and then saw her bid, which was obviously a lot better and sparklier, and it was really good. So I emailed her and said, look, we're kind of asking for the same, what about we join forces? And don't know if she thought initially I was mad, but we had a couple of intentional coffees and connected around that, and from there has grown this Powering Up dual site London Birmingham in collaboration with the Canal team here and a couple of other people, so Amy McLean, Lisa Van Gazel here in Birmingham. And so we've created this connection, which has then led to more connections and ultimately led to last week a huge explosion of pink at the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. So we had done work with schools in Birmingham, facilitated by Public Health and Community Partnership working through Amy McLean, and brought 70 children from secondary schools in Birmingham to the Children's Hospital to present their community research on topics around mental health, vaccination, performance-enhancing drugs, diet, access to healthcare information, loads of really interesting things. And so they came and presented to a load of clinicians and then got to discuss at a panel some of the issues that they were facing. We were able to ask questions to Matt Bozeman, who's the CEO of Birmingham Children's Hospital, Marion Gibbon, who's in charge of public health in the city for young people, and also Goody Singh. And that was really amazing as an event. And at that event, I know you were there, so it would be lovely to hear your perspective, actually, hear how that event went in terms of co-production, marks out of 10.
Oh, well, I was just so thrilled to be invited. I really was, and I didn't know what to expect. I definitely expected there to be more just, people coming along to an event. I didn't realise there'd be such a small number, really, of people who weren't the young people in the schools actually participating. So as I say, I was really thrilled to be invited along. I was blown away, really, by the authenticity and the innovation, I think, in terms of inviting young people from schools to come along, and they'd had the chance to do their research projects, and they all came on stage to report about it. And I could see that, I mean, honestly, at that age, I would have been absolutely terrified. And I could see that some of them were, but they still did it nonetheless. And I think the confidence and the just self-esteem that they could get from that, there's so many spin-off values for children beyond the actual event and the topic and what they're actually doing, through to one guy who I thought should have been on The Apprentice. He said...
That's Shrey. Oh, sure.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm going to tell you about him in a minute.
He gave his name, and I'd like to introduce you to my team. In fact, they could introduce themselves. And, you know, all of them had their place in terms of what they got to say and the level of confidence and what they probably were getting from the opportunity, as I say, beyond, you know, the actual topic and the subject of that day. I thought to give them the opportunity to ask questions to the panel of, as you say, very senior people was extraordinary. And then I was blown away by the actual questions that they asked. And I think young people ask really real questions. They weren't easy questions. They were challenging questions. And I thought for Matt, your chief executive, to put himself in that position, that's vulnerability, isn't it? For someone as senior as that, to be on stage live answering young people's questions. I thought the whole event was really amazing. And then now the other bits in terms of stories that you don't get is, for me on that day, I got a chance for the first time to meet you and Goody sing together, whereas I'd obviously met you separately before, to feel the energy and to sort of start to get into the pink hats movement, to sit next to one of your amazing clinicians, a haematologist, and we actually discovered that we'd got some personal connections. To meet Marion from Public Health, and possibly she might be a future podcast guest. We're both into poems. Definitely Goody Singh I'd love to have on the podcast. I think this could very much build this conversation. To chat to some of the young people even, you know, you've got all these different conversations and connections happening behind the scenes. I think it was a very special day. So well done.
Oh, we were so thrilled to have you with us. And I'm really hoping, as part of Powering Up, what we want to do is create content that we can then share and use to amplify the message from young people. And so we had one-to-one productions, Judy and Dean coming to film it.
Yes.
All the way from up north. And so hopefully we'll have some sound bites and some videos to share about the day and use that to further enhance the spirit of Powering Up. I think one of the things that came from that, so you touched on a couple of things. So our panel were amazing, really authentic, really real. So Matt was brilliant. Marion and Goody, I mean, Goody just says it how it is. And Marion was really open and honest and responsive. So we were really lucky with our panel.
Definitely.
And I think it was really interesting because I think it was either one of the young people or one of the panel asked me why pink. And we hadn't really had a chance to think about it, but actually pink is quite a bright colour and it's difficult to ignore. And I think from that conversation, what then happened, you're talking about ripple effects, is that I went home and ordered 6 more hats from Hens or Us or whatever. And we then took them to the Royal College meeting. So the paediatric national group is called the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, and they meet every year. And this year they met in Birmingham last week. And we were able to take that very group. So Shrey, he wants to be a barrister actually, and all the young 5 of them came up and presented on stage in a massive auditorium to a load of paediatricians, and they did the same presentation on their community research around performance enhancing drugs. And on stage was the president of our Royal College of Paediatrics, and gave them a little certificate. It was brilliant. It was so amazing.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was. And we then did a workshop with them later on in the Royal College meeting, and there were loads of really quite young paediatricians and some medical students, ranging up to some really influential paediatricians, you know, a couple from London, Amanda Watson from CC4C. So some really sort of movers and shakers of both present and future, hopefully. and Doug Simkis was there from Birmingham. So we had loads of really amazing people in the room, and these young people were able to share their stories in the powering up session, and everyone got a selfie with a pink hat. And Ria Berman, who's our young person that's leading a lot of this work, was also there and was able to tell her story. So it was a really blended approach, and I think it speaks to that idea of just having a little bit of fun injected. And the thing that you were saying around the Harry Potter Trivial Pursuit, well, actually, pink hats bring people together, because actually you can't ignore a pink hat. Everyone was asking about the pink hats. There's a story behind them. The young people wore them. The president of the Royal College wore them. You know, the staff, I think, wanted to take them home afterwards, so had to retrieve them. So I think there is that thing around just making things fun and joyful and creating connections in a positive way. And I think that's really got to be key.
So if we come together at an event, we can have a colour clash, because I'll have the lemons and you'll have the absolutely shocking pink.
Well, so... I think there's nothing wrong with that, Jill. We can have pink and yellow.
People will notice us, won't they? They will.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's about it. It's not being able to be ignored, being able to advocate for your patients, and being able, to say you can't ignore the lived experience. You can't ignore that idea of co-production, because you'll miss it. You'll miss something. You won't get where you need to go without the co-production.
Yeah. And I think something I picked up from what you said, the blended approach. Now, to take that in a slightly different direction, the work that I'm doing with Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust is all about children and young people, and it goes right to the roots of children without necessarily medical, the acute needs that you deal with, Mary, but mental health problems, special needs, the community aspect. And I think what we've found is that to listen to the children, listen to the parents, and just find out how difficult it is to access services. So I suppose what really interests me is just that family who are dealing with life, and they've got children, and the different children might have different needs, as we all do, and some of them might be very low-key needs, or some of them might be in danger of becoming more serious. And I suppose I've got this sort of gut feeling with Whose Shoes that family doesn't really care who provides services, and even whether they're called services at all, but to have the support that they need within the community, or to be able to reach out and know where to go for help with whatever needs the children, the family might have, and to see them as a holistic family unit. And I think to sort of look across all of that work, and then you're dealing with children with very highly complex clinical needs who could be within that same family. I just find it fascinating in terms of breaking down all of these barriers and seeing what really helps those children most. And that links me back a little bit. I think I mentioned at the beginning, just being able to send a child home. And I'm talking all over the place at the moment, but I really have been just so impressed, Mary, by the way that you can kind of get to the heart of what a family needs. And the medical term would be discharge. I call it going home. And would you like to tell us your thoughts on any of that?
So all of that speaks to ergonomics, or understanding systems, and actually an understanding framing and human factors. And I've been sort of on my journey of discovery around many of these topics, and I think the more I understand and learn, the more I see that we need to look at systems design and framing and language and all of those things when we're thinking about problem solving. So you are totally right. We see discharge as a medical thing, medically fit for discharge, socially fit for discharge, equipment. We see it in those terms, and that's the language we use. And I think one of the things that you talked about was around language. So in your initial podcast, you were talking about how we need to talk to somebody who understands management language to translate it. And I think the parallel is around actual language. So I speak a bit of Spanish, a bit of Arabic. If I'm talking to somebody and they understand language better in those terms, I'll flip. Now, actually, in the same way, that's what we need to do when we're looking at where we're going. We talk about our problem in management terms, and we have to learn a little bit of management language, and they have to learn our language, and that has to be the way that we move forward together. You know, if I'm talking entrepreneurially, I'll talk about leaning in, or I'll talk about pivoting, or I'll talk about USPs, or those kinds of terms. They're not medical terms, you know. When we're talking in the language of the patient, then we need to understand the language that they need, and they might think about home for your birthday or Mother's Day.
Yes.
Or the fact that it's a religious, they want to be able to observe Ramadan, or, you know, just really little things. Like, it took me 3 years of working in Birmingham to understand that even though a South Asian boy might have Muhammad as his first name, it's not the name he's called by his second name.
Yes.
Which is his, you know, Muhammad is a prefix, or almost like that's the way I understand it. So actually, those are the things that we need to understand.
Yes.
And actually, when I'm able in a consultation to say, oh, do you call him Ibrahim or Muhammad? And they say, oh, Ibrahim. They get a sense that you understand them a little bit better, and you can then make that connection and move forward. And I think in the same way, we need to understand the language of that family. And it may not be the same as the family we saw 10 minutes ago. It may be completely different. Their drivers may be different. The way they're set up is different. And I think the thing that our system is really bad at doing is understanding families' language and the family's drivers in the same way that we understand medical language, or even, you know, super specialist different language, or even language of care and commissioning. So I think that process change where you put the child and the family, I know we talk about putting the child and family centrally, but actually what is important to them, what matters to them, what are the metrics that they need, and what are the things that make the most difference to them, and actually trying to work together to marry those two up.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. And I think you mentioned names, and there's so many different, I think names are just so fascinating. The examples you gave, and you said it helps you understand better, but I think, again, you flip it from the family's point of view. Oh my goodness, somebody really cares, you know, someone who's so busy clinically, but they actually want to know what the preferred name is. It just something as simple as that, I think, can unleash a whole lot of feelings in terms of how that person feels valued or not, and doesn't take a lot of time.
And it is really interesting, because from the other side, if somebody does that to me as a service user, it makes a huge difference to me.
Yes.
If somebody understands that, I don't know, that we were facilitated when my dad was terminally ill to be able to take him to Egypt to see the Pope and to spend time with him. And despite all the medical equipment and all of filling and forms and risk assessments and all of that, I was facilitated in being able to do that because that was really important to us as a family. And I can still remember that trip, and many others also remember the time that was spent there. And I think that's really important. That's something that I take with me, and, you know, I'll never forget. But that required somebody to step outside their comfort zone in a clinical capacity. And I think when we do that, we might not see the impact and the effects, but actually they're there.
Yeah. And tiny things. I mean, I can remember when I had my first baby and I took him into work, and my mates were there, and it made a fuss, and it was lovely. But I didn't expect the director of social services, which is where I was working at the time, to come down and just say, oh, Jill, you know, lovely, congratulations, let's have a look. And took him, 5 minutes out of his day, and I'm talking about that nearly 40 years later. So and it can be tiny, can't it? Tiny examples, but things that really, really matter to the person.
And I think it's creating the space to understand that really matters. So actually, I think in palliative care, you have more time and more space. The challenge really is in acute care or A&E, or, you know, those kinds of scenarios. And that's where system design comes in, because you've got to design an ability for you to see that or hear that or create the space to have that discussion.
Yes.
So Jill, I think just reflecting on everything we've talked about, I think if I had one thing that I was going to want to be highlighted, it's around the power of learning from other people and connecting across boundaries. And that has enabled me to think really differently about lots of different things, connecting across being a service user and being a service deliverer, connecting across different disciplines, connecting across totally unrelated groups of people, learning from, being a mum or having to sort out sports logistics and transferring that to clinical practice and vice versa. And I think if there was one thing that I'd want people to think about would be around how we in the modern world, with all the noise that there is, create the space for this connection and this learning. So if I give you an example, last week Hannah Nicholson, who's our education person in CoLab, ran a workshop for paediatricians around how we improve care for children with complexity. And one of the people present was really frustrated with the time delay in getting equipment commissioned, which led to a delay in discharge. Now, in Birmingham, we've done work on this and published it. So actually, that's work that could be visible. But in the noise of all of the work that's being done, that wasn't visible to them. And the idea is around having an equipment loan bank that has been running through the Children with Complexities discharge team for the last few years and has saved over 1,000 bed days in time in hospital, because you're getting children out, which is where they need to be. They need to be with their families and with their siblings and not in hospital. So that intervention has made a real difference to children in Birmingham, but we want that intervention to be able to be amplified and spread and be useful for children in Manchester, in London, in the Outer Hebrides. It would be really amazing if that was spreadable. And I think that's the thing that we really face a challenge with in the NHS, is how you spread the good ideas. And I think one of the things that we have is too much noise, and we almost need to, and I have hashtagged this actually, condo the NHS. We need to stop doing things and create the space to be able to share the good stuff by just getting rid of the stuff that we don't need to do or no longer do but haven't got rid of, or cleaning the hard drives, and just making space for you to be able to think and spread and talk about the things that are important.
Yeah, that's a fantastic message. And I'm glad that you've at least touched upon that equipment work, because I think tangible examples like that, and that was one that I really remembered from what I learned from the CoLab talk that we did together, and just hearing you speak at various events. Something like a child is stuck in hospital because of stuff, really. That's what I call it. And that's what I love about you, Mary, that you'll find ways around the stuff to make the really important thing, oh my goodness, the child going home, happen. So is that example of the equipment on Fab NHS stuff?
No. And again, it's tribal, isn't it? It's tribal.
It is. Because I'm a massive fan of Fab NHS stuff. I've done a podcast with Terry Porrett. It's so simple, collect the good stuff and put it there. But then I say at events, how many people have heard of Fab NHS stuff? Not necessarily all that many people. So it's trying to break out of these tribal silo, whatever.
Yeah. And some of it's about amplification. So the equipment hire was, so we've got a family support worker, Mary Kelly, who works with Rachel Shanahan and Catherine in our team, and they created this equipment, but it wasn't me, it wasn't my idea.
Yeah.
It was their idea, because they see it on the ground, and they were really innovative, and they got this done, and it's been amplified within our trust. But I feel like it's my responsibility to amplify it wider and get more people to see it. But actually, that's maybe not in their arena. That might be kind of, tribally to paediatricians or tribally to NHS management. So it's trying to see how we can, again, translate something into a language that makes sense. And bed days are language, they're a currency and they're a language in themselves. And actually, maybe we need to be braver about the translation and braver about overcoming the boundaries. And maybe what you need to do is create a Duolingo equivalent.
Wow, that's... You can't just leave us hanging with a Duolingo equivalent. Expand on that just a tiny bit. What does that look like?
Well, so you're talking about, and maybe Hexitime is a Duolingo equivalent, because actually what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a resource where I can learn about management speak, or I can learn about the language of social care, or I can learn about the language of housing or local authority. So we've spent time looking at this when we're looking at discharging children from hospital, getting them out at home quicker, is actually how do we understand the housing system better? How do we use terms that are key phrases or terms that they need to move forward in their processes? So, for example, before we did any work with social care, I didn't know what an offer was, a local offer. I mean, you know, because you've got background in social care, but that was just an offer of what's on offer. It's not it's not a term that I understand or would use. How do you create that where you say, well, a local offer is X, Y, Z, and it's a stuff that isn't in your induction book.
No,
because it's just the way we speak and the way we mean things to be, and maybe they're different in Birmingham versus Glasgow, maybe, you know, but like in terms of just even within my tribe. But actually, how do we use that to translate and speak a common language?
And that so feeds into everything I do, really. And I can be very provocative, because I'd say, why should we need to learn all these languages? Why can't people just talk in a language that everyone understands? So you've got all these different phrases, and you've got, I mean, don't get me into acronyms. So
yeah.
When I do my co-production work with the Darcy Fellows, which is probably my favourite piece of work, and I've got the privilege of working with this fantastic group of healthcare professionals from right across the board each year. And I remember sitting with one group and saying, I knew there was an obstetrician around the table, so I was cheating a bit. And I said, someone's coming to the hospital for an IOL. Does anyone know what that is? And she said, oh, induction of labour. And I said, well, that's funny, because he's a man and he's going to the eye department, and I think he thinks he wants an intraocular lens. Yeah. So
I mean, that speaks to so many things. And you know, Jo, I've been teaching human factors for 10 years or so, and actually we talk about that. We talk about language and jargon, and I think your aspiration that we'd be able to drill and talk about requires time. So I think a lot of the jargon is to simplify for timeliness, for efficiency. And so a lot of the things that we've created have been around improving efficiency within our systems.
Obviously, yeah, of course.
Including the language that we use. Yeah.
I'm being naughty.
No, I know you know. But so if you're doing that to improve efficiency, what you need to do is you need to create the space to be able to have that conversation, because you can't do it at pace. You can't have those conversations at pace unless you understand the language. And I think, you know, when I was a house officer back in the day, when they were called house officers and not FY ones, I worked in a rural Dunfermline, which is in Scotland near Carlisle.
Where my grandma comes from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know where Dunfermline is, yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, people are lovely, and they're all farmers, and they're all really stoic, and they never complain about anything. They might be having a heart attack, but you wouldn't know, and that kind of thing. Anyway, so they're lovely people. So, but I'd come as a Londoner studying in Scotland, you know, in a city, then I'd come to do this job, and I didn't understand what people were saying. I genuinely, there were words they were using, I didn't understand. And so my my consultant at the time bought me a dictionary, an English-Scottish dictionary, which I've still got, actually. I've still got it on my shelf. And you know what? I think that just highlights some of the things. And it's the same wherever you go. You know, if you go to the Black Country, what is dinner? What is tea? You know, it's very different to what I might say, even in sort of south of Birmingham or Warwickshire or, you know, London. It's a different language. And unless you seek to learn and actually just asking about the language creates the connection. So I think we do need Duolingo.
Yeah, and just as a very silly note to finish on, as a child, I remember my next door neighbour asking me if I wanted to spend a penny. And we used to have a corner shop, like literally, 50 yards up the road, where in those days, it obviously shows my age, you could spend a penny and get some fruit salads and a blackjack in a little cone. And I was very excited and said, yes, please. And she sent me to the toilet. So we need to understand each other's language.
That's exactly it. That's a nice way to finish.
So, well, thank you so much, Mary. It's been absolutely amazing talking to you. I knew we could talk all day, so I think we probably better stop there. But so many messages. Is there anything you want to say as a sort of final?
I think what I would say to anyone is be curious, be furious, go outside your comfort zone, make a connection, send an email, pick up the phone. That's the way we're going to make it better.
Brilliant. Love it, Mary. So you keep doing that, because you're doing that in spades in everything that you do. It runs through you like a stick of rock, and I'm so delighted to talk to you today. Thanks for making the time.
Oh, thank you, Jill. That was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would be fantastic if you would leave a review and a rating, as well as recommending the Wildcard Who Shoes podcast series to anyone who you think might find it interesting. And please subscribe. That way you get to hear when new episodes are available. I have lots more wonderful podcast guests in the pipeline. And don't forget to explore and share previous episodes. So many conversations with amazing people who are courageously sharing their stories and experiences across a very wide range of topics. I tweet as Whose Shoes. Thank you for being on this journey with me, and let's hope that together we can make a difference. See you next time.